All right, Jay Sarah, we're about to go to San Diego to visit my pops, where we're gonna do the brain lecture. Quick pit stop at my stepmom's house, where my childhood home is. It's freaking nice now, though. Take your shoes off. I get yelled at all the time for having my shoes on in the house and for walking. So here it is, my childhood home. You can kind of see the living room back here. There's my brother Jacob. Hey. This is Karen, my stepmom.
Hi, everybody.
This is the view from my house growing up. I used to go to grade school right there. You can see the ocean back there. It's pretty good. Right there is my treehouse. My ride's here. Dr. T pulling up to bring us to UCSD. So this is Dr. T, my dad. Many a times have we drove this path. Driven this path. You know, what is the first thing comes to mind when you think of your son, me, driving?
Damaging the car on each of the first several trips out.
Do you remember the time you took me to Disneyland? How long did I make it before you told me?
20 minutes.
Which time?
And you were crying, thinking that you were going to miss your school, and I said, God, all right, I'm taking you to Disneyland.
That was not 20 minutes, that was like 5 minutes. It was at the bottom of the gas station right down here.
No, we were by Solana Beach.
No, you're confusing two different stories. The second story was when I was going to Winston, the school for the undermotivated, and I didn't care as much. And then we were in Solana Beach, and I was like, "Are you sure we haven't passed school?" And he started laughing and telling me that it had long gone.
What a great parent who just took his kid as a surprise to Disneyland on a regular school day.
I know, it's the parent of the year right there.
Yeah.
Welcome to UCSD. Woohoo! Here they go. Don't park in the professor's spots. School of Medicine and brain research and stuff. Did you get him?
Yep.
Was justice served? So Dad's old building was over there. Here we are. Oh, the places I used to play as a kid.
Brain. Any guesses what species this is from? Here it is on top of the human brain.
Dang, look at that.
Here it is, fitting in on my index finger. Here's my index finger next to the human brain. Okay, well, we're going to leave
Give
that.
it a guess.
We'll come back to that. Here's another brain, bigger one. See that difference in size? And then you come here to the human brain. There's the comparison.
It's cool to see it.
Any guess about
lined up like that.
what kind of brain this is?
I feel like it looks more like lungs.
Be like a mouse, or like a rat.
Yeah, well, so you're right on both counts. Here's a mouse brain, and that's how much bigger the rat brain is. Here they both are compared to the human brain. And then finally, we have another brain here.
Can I touch it?
You may. And here is its comparison to the mouse brain, the rat brain. So this is a bigger brain. And here is its comparison to the human brain. Any guess about what kind of brain this might be? You notice how this brain is smooth on the surface, right? Can you see that? It has no folds. This one's not smooth. It has folds. See? And the human brain has abundant folds. See all those folds?
Yeah.
So that suggests that this is a smarter species because more folds gives you more surface area in the brain, and that makes you smarter. So now what's your guess about what kind of brain this is? Oh, I heard you say the right answer. Monkey. Very good.
Just
Here, hold that. Turn it around.
okay.
So this, the gray stuff, is gray matter. The white stuff is white matter. So the gray is where the cells are, and the white matter is the connections that between the cells, the wires that travel between the different cells of the brain.
Is that kind of where the term like Gray's Anatomy comes from, or is that isn't that like it's a textbook or something, isn't it?
It's a textbook written by a man named Gray.
Okay, that's it.
Yep,
Well,
that's it.
that's anticlimactic. All right, that's good.
So, Mr. T.
So all year, our class has been talking about what makes. I mean, we started off the year in Theology of the Body as saying what makes you you. We talked about John Paul II and who he is, but then our second piece to it is what is the human person, right? And the church gives 3 answers, and I wonder how many answers the kids remember. But looking at it from more of a biological perspective, what makes a person a person? Because if I were to ask you, a doctor and neurosurgeon,
I'm not a neurosurgeon.
I always neurologist.
Yeah.
Okay, well, tell me and everybody the difference between a neurosurgeon and a neurologist.
A neurosurgeon does surgery. A
Okay.
neurologist does just. That's a little bit of a joke. It fell flat. So neurosurgeons do surgery on the brain. Neurologists diagnose problems with the brain, but they don't do surgery.
Okay.
So we diagnose the problem, and if the person has a brain problem and they need surgery, we send them to the surgeon. So neurosurgeon is really a glorified carpenter who does our carpentry for us.
So the
That's
real
again,
mind, yeah.
In the context of medicine, that's
Yeah.
another little joke.
Yeah.
You know? It's like the joke, what does it take to be an orthopedic surgeon? You know, a surgeon who works on joints and bones. And the answer is you have to be strong as a horse and half as smart.
Nice.
Again,
Good one.
just a little insider joke in the world of medicine.
Yeah. I guess the question then to be posed for the class then is kind of like, if you were to look at a human body and a human person, is this all we can account for the human person, right? Because we ask the question of what makes you you, it's kind of the question about the mind versus the brain and what the difference might be. I don't know if we want to start out with kind of, you know, a brief intro on like, if I were to look at this brain and ask, you know, what is a human person? Like, how much of a human person is stored in this former organ? How much, like, what would you say?
Well, so what you're asking is, for all of our thoughts, for all of our personality, can all of it be accounted for by the brain? Does the brain constitute everything that represents who we are as people? And that's been an ongoing philosophical debate for centuries. And another way to put that is there a soul that is separate from our brain? Is there a soul that is separate from our body and that lives after we die? Or is our the entirety of our life determined in this organic matter? And is there really nothing beyond that? And my answer to this is that nobody has proof of any of this. There is no proof that there is a soul that continues after life, nor is there proof that a soul doesn't continue after life. It's very hard to gain evidence for these sorts of things. People will point to certain observations, certain logical deductive reasoning that's convincing to them, but from a standpoint of pure knowledge and what we can test and see and answer, we just can't answer that question. We can neither confirm that there is a soul that continues after life, nor can we disprove it. It remains an open question. And hence there's so much human conflict around that question over the centuries. But let's reframe that question a little differently. So when you decide that you want to move, then certainly part of your brain generates that movement. And that part of the brain is here in the front part of the brain called the frontal cortex. It's actually pretty much, if you want to move your arm, then the part of the brain that does it is right around here. So we have this whole brain, but if you want to move it, it's right about here. What if you just think you want to move it and you don't actually move it? Well, this is still the part of the brain that thinks about moving it, whether you move it or not. So is there anything outside of this? Is there anything in your spirit? If there is a spirit that's separate from the brain that you would need to move this? Well, one way to get at that question is to say, well, what if you take out this part of the brain? And that happens all the time in people. They're called strokes or tumors or abscesses, infections. Those sorts of things can remove basically a part of the brain, and then we can see what happens. So if we remove this part of a brain in a person, they're paralyzed and they can't move. That's it. All of the ability to generate a movement is contained right here in the brain. The brain sends the signal to the spinal cord and then to the muscle. But without the brain, you can never have movement. So then what about other things that come from the brain? Thoughts, ideas, concepts, philosophies. If you took away the brain, would they persist? Well, certainly not in the sense of being able to talk about it. So then the question is still on a philosophical level. Even given that, if you take away this brain, you're standing here in front of me. If your brain were removed, would there be some spirit capable of communicating with me? Not on any level that we understand. So that's kind of the argument.
Yeah.
Does this organic matter account for everything that is us, our movement, our feeling, our personality? And is there some soul beyond that that's separate from the brain?
Yeah.
And again, I come back to there is no way to generate proof for any of that, at least from my perspective.
Right. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about this actual brain, because we're looking at a brain, it can kind of feel a little impersonal. But one thing I like that we always talk about is how despite the fact that we come from different philosophies and worldviews and religions, is that we both have this great respect and sacredness and almost sanctity for this organ right here, because this was the seed of the person, no matter kind of what perspective you come from, right? So who was this person? I kind of tease this for my class all year long, and unfortunately I don't get to see this in front of them, nor do they get to hold it, but one of the things I said was that at some point at the end of the year, you're going to see a brain of the person who is living today. So can you tell me maybe how old this person was when they died, or how long ago?
This was a man in his 80s who had Alzheimer's disease. And he passed away a few months ago, actually. And prior to that time, he was a human being walking and talking and interacting with people. So
that would have been February, I guess?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. So when we started this semester, this person was somebody, was walking around, maybe lying down, or somebody's husband.
This was a living human
Yeah.
being, and so it's just amazing, and like you said, sacred. Whether you believe in God or not, some things are sacred, and having the ability to look at this, this crescendo of evolution, this apex, and what's able to generate intellect, philosophy, thought, literature. This is it right here in our hands.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's incredible. It really is.
A lot of people will look at, monkeys and gorillas. Oh, the formaldehyde getting to you?
Yep, it certainly is.
And ask the question, like, how do we know something deeper isn't going on in their thoughts? How do we know that, I don't know, how do we know they're not thinking about their own existence, in other words? And I think one of the ways to kind of look at that is see, like, the difference between our brains here. Maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I mean, this part that's part of our brain, right? In case they tuned in. I can't remember when I started filming, but this is the bottom part of the human brain, which is about the same size as this brain, which is a primate, right?
And that's the entire brain of the monkey, yeah.
Would this be the most advanced primate brain?
No,
we have,
no,
or okay.
no,
Yeah.
no. The most advanced non-human primate brain would be a chimpanzee.
Okay.
So
What's this one?
this is what's called a rhesus monkey.
Okay.
And this is one of the most common monkeys in the world. These run around India and China, out in the wild, and some islands in the Caribbean, believe it or not.
How different would that look from a chimpanzee brain?
Chimpanzee brain would look pretty close to ours. It would be smaller and slightly fewer folds.
Okay.
But the presence of these folds on the brain, let's look at it this way. The human brain has the folds. This rat brain doesn't. It's very flat. So why did nature evolve our brain in such a way to make it folded like that? And the answer was to give us more brain capacity that could fit in our skull. So think of the rat brain as this piece of paper. And here's the amount of space it's taking it up. Now if you fold it, crumple it, it's not taking up that much space anymore. And so now you can take many more of these and fit it into that same flat area that holds the rat brain. So we can pack many more cells, neural cells called neurons, into our brains by folding them.
Yeah.
So that gives us much greater brain capacity. And you start to see folding when you get to more intelligent species like monkeys.
And essentially, it's this folding that enables us to have the ability to question our own existence, to take out a brain and look at this and question, where did these things come from?
Yeah, it's this structure of the brain that gives us the ability to ask the question, who am I? And we are the only species that we're aware of who reflects enough to be able to say, who am I? And ask yourself, if you sort of want common sense answer to how intelligent are some other animals, can you imagine a chimpanzee saying, who am I? Maybe not,
Yeah.
right? So that's a unique aspect of us. Now, can you expect a human to say, who am I? So there's your answer.
Yeah. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about the different parts of this particular person. So, for this particular man who was living just a couple months ago and was struggling with, the degenerative disease, Alzheimer's disease. I mean, I think you used to talk to me about this too, is just how, like, this is one of the most debilitating diseases because, in a sense, it feels like you're losing part of you. Why might you say that?
Well, what I say is that in Alzheimer's disease, you lose the essence of your humanity. Because we've been talking about this. What makes us so special is that ability to say, who am I? And you lose that ability with Alzheimer's disease. Our intellect sets us apart from every other species. And so isn't that key? Isn't that beautiful to see this brain and say, wow, this is the essence of our humanity? And so diseases that rob us of the function of our brain, especially at the level of intellect, are particularly tragic.
So this is the front part of the brain right here, right? And this is the back.
Yeah.
So if one thing we sometimes do in class is you'll invite somebody up and tell them, like, I remember you did this one time and asked them, tell me your address growing up, or those of you that have moved. And you kind of said, depending on where they move their eyes, you can tell them where in the brain that's stored. Correct? Sometimes, maybe. You often forget some of the things that you do, or maybe I'm remembering them wrong.
Well.
Do you not remember that? Because that was one of the most fascinating lessons. Okay.
I do, but at least my take on it is slightly different, and that's that when I say to you, what was our address when you were 9 years old?
Okay, and I would say 8261 Caminito Modena,
Right.
San Diego, California, shoe.
Shoe. Because he was a child, and I had to motivate him, so I said something silly at the end. Oh, and he paid attention. You can try it when you're grown-ups and you have children. But at any rate, just think about that for a moment. So as Mr. T was remembering that number from decades ago, he was hearing the sound of it, 8261, 82, and that sound is stored. That sound of the address is stored in this part of the brain called the auditory cortex of the temporal lobe. He might have had a picture of it. I did, as he was saying that. I had a picture of 8261.
What was your picture, by the way? Because mine...
Well, like written down on a piece of paper.
Okay, well, my picture was us going over the speed bump right around the corner to the house. Because I remember specifically that was the part where you would always ask me that. So I remember that, the feeling of the bump. I remember the forerunner and the feel of the chair that was underneath me. I can remember the smell. I can remember the time of day it was. It's a very vivid memory, and so I think that was part of, because we were talking about this in body language about how it's stored in different areas, and that kind of skews sometimes the eye movement and the guessing, right? Because if it's auditory, if you're using the smell, if you're using the vision, it's multiple storages, right?
Right, so that memory for you especially is stored in many parts of your brain, so you remember the image. So that's back here in the back part, the visual part of the brain called the occipital lobe, right there. You remember the smell. The smell is something that's related to a whole system of connections of different parts of the brain called the limbic system. And part of that smell happens, well, some of smell is here under the top of the brain in an area called the olfactory bulb. But the
olfactory bulb. I was going to guess that one.
Yeah, olfactory. Good. Olfaction is smell. But then the emotional reaction to smell occurs over in this part of the brain underneath called the amygdala, which is part of the temporal lobe.
That's part of the... Is amygdala part of memory? Or does it play a role?
It's part of memory. It's part of the emotional components of memory. Yeah, the amygdala is a very interesting part of the brain because if something horrible happens to you, you tend to have that memory and it sticks with you for a long time. And in neuroscience, that's called single trial learning. You just have one exposure to something and boom, the memory seems like it's hardwired. That happens in the amygdala. It's one of the most robust forms of memory.
Is that involved with trauma at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody has a severe emotional trauma, just one spell of it, it will be represented in the amygdala.
Which is where again?
Well, the amygdala tends to be in this part of the brain here.
And that's the inside half.
You
can tell.
Yeah, here's the outside, and we turned now toward the inside part of the brain. It's right around here.
If some of the students, again, I can't remember if I was recording during this part, but why is the brain sliced into so many pieces right now?
Well, I don't know if I told you why before. This was the brain that we had available right now for our little get-together here. Somebody had already sliced it. We didn't have another full brain because things have slowed down here. For brain procurement during the COVID crisis, so this is what we had.
How do you get
one that was already cut?
Some of the students want to know how you get a hold of brains. How is this a thing?
Well,
my typical answer is you do research on the brain.
Yeah.
Is it that simple?
Well, that's not how I get it. So some people donate their bodies to science.
Yeah.
So that's one way of getting brains. When there are deaths in the community that are unexplained, then those brains are examined, but then they go back to the family for a burial. And then some of our brains here are by people who belong to an Alzheimer's disease research program run here at UCSD, which people agree before they die to donate their brain, just their brain, and not the rest of the body, for research into Alzheimer's disease. And those are incredible gifts. You know, the gift of being able to study somebody's brain is just incredible and very valuable. So we're always grateful for that.
Yeah. We switched places because my phone was about to die. So we were talking about kind of my own memories and where that is stored and how we have various places of smells. It's stored kind of throughout the brain. So if you were to ask about the person whose brain this was, and who they were, and kind of why Alzheimer's is such a, debilitating disease, because you kind of, in your words, you lose your essence in some ways, because your essence of who you are is, and scientifically and maybe more physically speaking, scattered throughout the brain, right? Is there any part of you that is maybe say stored in the heart? Like, is there any sort of part of if you were to examine Matthew's heart, would you find any piece of Matthew there?
What do you think about that, Justin? You think any part of who we are, of our mind, of our personality is in our heart? I mean, are you a heartless individual, or is part of your, emotional, loving state actually carried here in your chest?
I just view the heart as just an organ that pumps blood. There's really anything that has to do with the soul and the heart. If anything, I would expect it to be in the brain, because that's where a lot of that thinking happens.
Yeah, ding, 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 right answer. So the heart is just a muscle. That's all it is. It's a muscle, and these cells that do our thinking and our feeling and our emotions are neurons. That's the single cell unit of thinking in the brain. Now, an actual thought results when tens to hundreds to millions of neurons fire together. So one cell can't come up with a thought or an emotion, but groups of cells do. Like I said, dozens to hundreds to thousands of cells, through coordinated electrical activity, generate thought, generate emotion. And that takes a neuron. That basic unit is still a nerve cell. That is kind of shaped like a little pyramid. And the heart is a muscle. It does not have more than a few of these neurons that are capable of doing anything like this. And those neurons are there just to control things like heart rate and that sort of thing. They're not really thinking units. So why historically did people think emotions were in the heart? Any guesses?
Maybe when they have strong emotions, they could feel something in their heart. They don't really necessarily feel anything in their head, but a lot of the strong emotions would cause increased heart rate, or you feel your chest is heavy. So maybe that's
or you feel your heart pounding, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly it. So once again, ding, 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 good answer. Because, I think that the historical basis of people attributing emotion to the heart is that people's heart would go thumping, or, you're very scared. You have that fight or flight response. You feel the thumping in your chest, or you're very embarrassed, and sometimes your heart thumps. Or at least mine did when I was a kid. I don't get embarrassed much anymore.
I have a question. I thought I've read somewhere too that there is actually neurons that go, from the brain, that are connected to the brain, that go kind of around the heart and around the stomach, and that signal. So when we feel butterflies in our stomach, when we see somebody, attractive, or when we feel a rush of fear when we're on a roller coaster, is part of that because there are actual neurons or something that is connected from our stomach that go to the brain that make us feel those feelings in those parts, even though it's our brain signaling this is scary, but we feel it down here. Do you know much about that?
Yes, but most of the communication is from the brain to the stomach, and the brain to the heart and that kind of thing. Most of it flows from the brain to those places. But when the brain is excited, then it can change the activity in those places.
Okay.
And that's why you may feel some sensation in your stomach.
Is it a both and then? There are maybe nerves in your stomach that signal the brain, or is it basically the same thing because you're feeling apprehensive?
There are some nerves in your stomach and your abdomen that do signal the brain.
Okay.
Yeah, those are nerves in a nerve called the vagus nerve.
Mhm.
So yes, there is some flow from the stomach to the brain. Probably most of the flow is from the brain to the stomach.
Okay. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth communication between the brain and the body. So
Mhm.
when we feel, that's almost all sensation coming from the body to the brain, right? So
Mhm.
you can't imagine any way it would be otherwise. But when we move, that's all coming from the brain out to the muscles.
Mhm.
So
So scientifically speaking, can we say that at least from your best, from all of your experience and research, everything that you are is basically stored in this organ?
well, everything that we can measure
Mm-hmm.
is stored in this organ.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that so that the question becomes, on a philosophical level, can we measure everything? Do we even know what all the parameters are to measure? And I think to that there's not a certain answer. There's not a definite yes or no.
Even scientifically speaking.
Well, you can't know what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And do we claim to have complete knowledge of everything in the physical universe? Certainly not.
Mhm.
And that's absurd, right?
Yeah.
Take even our concepts, let's be philosophical now. Take our concepts of time and space in the physical universe. They can't possibly be correct because time is a linear thing. But think about, when did time begin? If it's just something that began and keeps going forward, and when will it end? Just
Mhm.
with the concept of time, this linear flow doesn't fit the experience of what time really is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some fundamental aspect of time that we don't understand. So if we claim to know everything about time, we're simply naive.
Mm-hmm.
Same with space. Where does physical space begin and where does it end? How could physical space end? Our minds can't get around these concepts,
Right.
and hence our understanding of what physical space is can't be complete. There has to be some other aspect to the phenomenon of space that we simply don't understand. So given that, we have fundamental lack of knowledge both with regard to time and space. How could he possibly claim to know that we know enough to ask every question we could about the brain and its function?
Mm-hmm.
And whether all of consciousness is truly represented in this brain.
Mhm.
You know, the only thing we can say about consciousness, personality, is that if we take your brain away, we can certainly observe absolutely none of it. And then it becomes a matter of mysticism, of metaphysical state, to say, well, something persists beyond that. Well, how can you know that? Well, I think it's the case, and I'd like to generate for you a logical argument that it exists. Well, okay, go ahead and generate the logical argument, but I don't accept many of the premises you're using to base your logical argument. So you may convince yourself, but you'll probably not convince me.
Yeah.
You know, there is just some things that we can't prove.
Right. So I guess, and the question maybe posed to the students then is that, kind of explore your own beliefs about this. Like, is this wonderful, sacred, and beautiful organ, especially compared to this monkey brain, is this it? Is the person whose memories and feelings and ideas occupied this space at one point, is he now gone? And gone forever? And I think that's part of, in many ways, our crisis with some of this coronavirus stuff, is that we're, in many ways, kind of being forced into to consider our death and to consider what's happening beyond this. And there's a lot of fear and anxiety surrounding this.
Mm-hmm.
So these questions, I think, are super important. And you can learn it through, these really interesting ways of interacting with our actual organs through different opportunities like the research I think that you do, and, the research you're doing to kind of help prevent debilitating diseases that in many ways kind of start to take away what feels, at least, or in many ways measurable to be us. And I think that's kind of all I really have for the students. Did you have any last thoughts you wanted to share, or questions you want to pose to me?
Well, I would just say this. Most of your students all of your students are in high school. That much we can be sure of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have their whole lives ahead of them. And, this beautiful organ that I'm now taking into my hands, it's capable of doing an incredible amount. it's almost limitless in what it can do in the realm of human experience, right? So use it, you know? It can allow you to do great things with your life. It can allow you to be great spiritual beings while you exist in this time and place that we all recognize as part of our current existence. So don't limit yourself, pursue your dreams, and make the best use of this that you possibly can by doing that, by pursuing your dreams. Don't pursue an empty dream where at the age of 40 you think, okay, well, gee, I got the job I want, I have the house I want, now what? That's not really using it. Think about what you're passionate about. Think about what you really want to do with your life for the planet, for humanity, for all species on the planet, and say, what can I do to make the best use of this? I think that's truly living. And your students are at the point where their whole lives are in front of them, so think about that. Don't stop dreaming. Start dreaming if you haven't been already.
Can I ask you a bonus question I just thought of
Yeah,
too?
sure.
Some people say that we only use about 10% of this. What do you say to that?
At any one time, we're using about 10% of it or less. But at some time or another, we use all of it.
So we're never only using 10. It's just at one particular moment. What would happen? Like, could we theoretically unlock the ability to use all of it all at once?
Well, no, because then you couldn't focus and do what you need to do. So part of the reason we only use parts of it at one time is that we can focus. So, you know, if you're trying to come up with the answer to a math problem and you're trying to move your right leg in a coordinated way and with your left leg run and do something else with your left hand and try to recall a memory, see, that's using your whole brain at once and you have chaos. So,
Didn't you tell me once that's kind of what's going on in a seizure? You kind of have information overload in a sense?
yes, but you also have very strong discharges, so it's just driving everything, and everything fails under
Okay.
those circumstances, temporarily.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for allowing us this opportunity.
Sure.
There it is. That was our brief discussion on the brain, or not so brief, depending on how you look at it. My dad obviously comes from the worldview of not knowing. I obviously come from the Catholic worldview, where I believe that there is various proofs for the existence of the soul. And a lot of that comes down to whether or not you think you can prove things with or without material evidence, right? There are some people that come from the worldview that if I can't see it or touch it or test it, then I don't believe in it. But beyond that, there are lots of other sciences, lots of other ways to reason to prove that certain things exist. You know, kind of what we talked about in the beginning of the year about the existence of the soul or the existence of love or the theory of knowledge. Like, all of those are immaterial things. So I provided you a whole bunch of links and articles and videos to do some more reading on it. There's a lot of great Catholic and Christian answers to the question of, can we prove there is a soul? And I come from the worldview that you can. And we didn't have enough time to do that, both with my dad or in class. So I really encourage you guys to keep asking questions, use that brain of yours, and to try to come to your own understanding of this, because if you don't, nobody else will. Well, somebody else has come up with it, but it's up to you to see what you think and to see how you kind of come to this on your own. I still have a few more things in the video to share with you, so keep watching. But for those of you, if you're looking for an answer and wondering if that's it, that isn't it. There's a whole lot more. That was just a really small, brief window of discussion about the nature of who you are. I hope you enjoy the visuals in the brain, and I'll see you guys soon. Why can I sit here?
I can beat it.
When you think of, if I were to say, think of a time where Matthew got in big trouble, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
I can't think of anything.
How dare you? You can think of something. He's just trying to flatter me.
You had the rollover accident, and that wasn't your fault, but that's the only thing that comes to my mind.
The only thing, like, if someone said, did Matthew ever get into trouble? You can't think of anything?
No?
Oh, I see. I'm just such a good person that, I never got into trouble.
Yeah,
You know-
you didn't generally get in trouble.
If somebody were to say to you, you can think of a time when Matthew got in trouble, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
When you were using your boogie board to go down
I was going to show them that place.
this place that when you landed on a street, you could get run over by a car.
That was one of my favorite things.
And that was so dangerous. And you thought it was fun, but not okay.
Yeah, I'd probably, that was one of the most dangerous things. I don't know if I necessarily got in trouble.
Well, also, there was a rollerblading incident.
Oh, well, that was another, that's, you, see, it's funny, when you think of trouble, you think of
Right.
danger.
I think of danger.
Which is kind of theology of the body in many ways.
Right.
Because you're concerned for my well-being.
Absolutely. To me, it was scary as heck. And
You can say hell. If there's a student out there that's having a really difficult time with their parents, based off of our own experiences, what might you say?
you know, it's really hard because a child doesn't have the tools yet. In fact, that's why I firmly believe that it's really, really the responsibility of the parent to do it right. Because the child doesn't know how to say to the parent, you know, yet. Like, when you say this to me, I feel small. They don't have the vocabulary. You know, the way I'm trying to bring up the other 3 teens is I'm trying to give them a voice to tell me when I'm not doing it right. Because I'm not always doing it right. You know, sometimes I put myself first. Sometimes I'm not really considerate of what they need. I'm selfish. And the best thing I can do is advise parents, which is like, know your dark side. Like, know all the ways in which you're holding back, where you're projecting, where you're selfish, you know, because I'm selfish, and you know that about me, Matthew. And that got in the way of you and me when I was younger. And it took me a long time to realize how selfish I was with you.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I don't really have too much advice for the child.
No,
I have
that's
much
great.
more advice for the
I think just hearing that was really good. I think I told him a story once that you told me about Tom, when you called Tom.
Do you want me to describe that?
Maybe just really quickly, because...
Very quickly, reached out to someone from the gathering who knew you well to ask for help and how the heck do I deal with this difficult stepson. And he just looked at me and he said, are you kidding me? Like, you're the one who has to do the work here, not him.
Yeah.
You're the one who has to grow up. And that was huge, shocking, but, you know, luckily I was receptive to it. He blew my mind, and I'll never forget that.
So, it is the end of the day. I'm about to head to my dad's house now. My dad lives in, I guess this would be Bird Rock. Hello. Doggy. Beach. Yeah, it's an okay place. Hi. Hi, puppy. Hi. Hey, look at this. This is not bad. Look, that is Bird Rock. Guess being a neurologist pays off, huh? Sarah, she's my sister. Look, she has pink hair now. Look at that. Can't do that at J. Sarah. Because it has to be natural hair colors. Because, you know, that's just the way it is. I get asked that for my students all the time. I'm not going to get into it now. You see what I have to deal with? No.
Give them a debate.
No.
Do it.
Today's about the brain. Bye. This is Gabe. Gabe's got into Santa Barbara and
Cal Poly.
where are you gonna go, Gabe? Well, if you guys go to Cal Poly or SLO, no, that's the same place. Cal Poly, SLO, or USB, you might see Gabe.
UCSB, but
That's what I said. This is Jacob. Hi, Jacob. Say hi to everybody. Hi. Oh, also, this video wouldn't be complete unless I introduced you to my mom.
Are you taking pictures of me?
It's being recorded right now.
Are you taking pictures of me? Do
I'm
I
not
look
taking
pretty?
pictures of...
Is it just audio?
No, it's visual.
Visual. Do I get to see this movie?
Yes, if you would like. So everybody, this is my mom, Barbara Tushinsky.
Yes, my name is Barbara Tushinsky.
When you think of biggest thing Matthew got in trouble in when I was growing up, what comes to mind?
I think you know what I'm going to say.
I have no idea what I've asked this question a few times, and none of them have been the ones that I thought they were going to say.
You mean of all the other people?
I asked Dad, I asked Karen.
You
We saved the best for last, Mom, on Mother's Day.
you helped yourself to a candy bar at the milk store.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. My first and last stolen candy bar. How do you remember that story?
How do I remember it? Because it was quite impressive.
No, how? Oh, so she was impressed with my thievery. I could have had a very different career.
It just seemed, I mean, it was just so astonishing to me. I was so shocked. And I made you march right in there and pay for it.
Well, you made me apologize. I think you paid for it.
Well, yeah, you didn't
Did you
have
give me
any
money to give to him? I don't remember that part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember the part how you made me eat it?
The candy bar?
Yeah.
Did
It
you
was
not
the worst candy bar I ever ate. It was a candy bar of pain.
Because
Well, you made me feel really bad and guilty about it.
and then you didn't want to
And
eat
then
it
you
at
said,
all.
you eat that candy bar. Like, I don't want to eat it. He's like, you eat it. You took it, you eat it. I'm like, I don't want to eat it.
That's funny.
But she said we didn't have enough money to get the candy bar. So I'm like, oh, well, I have this big old boot here. I'll just put it inside. Because it's winter in Minnesota.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's right.
I thought you'd be proud of me because I, got food for our family like the man is supposed to do.
Well, wrong kind of food.
No, it was great. It was chocolate. It has got fat for the winter because it was a cold winter.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what you were thinking. That's good. Good one.
I'm surprised nobody brought up the fact that my dad didn't bring up the fact when the police brought me home.
Yeah, what about the fence you and who was it? Was it John?
Well, anyway, this is my mom, everybody. Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
Thank you, Matthew.
Oh, the video seemed to be cut off for some reason, or we lost the footage, or there was a corruption. That's what it was. So, anyway, I hope you guys really enjoyed that, and I hope you have a great rest of your month. See you guys at graduation.